Beneath the burning sands of Egypt, where the winds sigh like the last breath of ancient kings, lies a secret older than memory. For centuries, the tombs of the pharaohs remained untouched, their golden chambers sealed against the ages, their treasures hidden from mortal eyes. But the silence was never perfect. Among the dunes and crumbling temples, there were always whispers, quiet, ominous promises that those who dared disturb the resting places of the mighty would awaken forces beyond understanding. Legends spoke of a curse woven into the very stones of the Valley of the Kings. A warning passed down through generations. The pharaohs had entrusted their eternal peace to powers that even death could not tame. It was said that when the sacred seals were broken, when the breath of 1,000 years escaped into the desert air, vengeance would follow. Not swiftly, but surely, stalking its victims with unseen steps, claiming them one by one. In the early 20th century, the world would witness these ancient warnings come to life. An expedition of explorers and dreamers would step into the darkness, and soon after, death would begin to whisper once more. The sands of Egypt would not give up their secrets easily. And those who listened closely could almost hear it. A soft voice carried by the wind disturbed the dead and joined them. The early 20th century was a time of fascination with the ancient world. Europe, still reeling from the devastation of the First World War, turned its gaze backward, searching for meaning, stability, and a connection to civilizations that seemed eternal. Nowhere was this yearning stronger than in Egypt. The great age of exploration had already revealed magnificent secrets. Towering statues buried in desert sands, the sprawling ruins of temples, and glittering fragments of a forgotten empire. The public imagination was captivated. Exhibitions of Egyptian artifacts drew enormous crowds. Books on mummies and pyramids became bestsellers. The mysteries of ancient Egypt promised answers to a restless, disillusioned generation. Archaeologists, fueled by dreams of discovery and fame, flocked to the Nile. Among them was Howard Carter, a man whose name would soon become legend. Born in 1874 in London, Carter was the son of a modest artist. With little formal education, he honed his skills as a draftsman, illustrating the intricate details of ancient tombs. His early years in Egypt, assisting excavations in Beni Hassan and Amarna, earned him a reputation for precision and for stubbornness. By the 1910s, Carter had become a seasoned Egyptologist, though his career was marked by conflicts with Egyptian authorities and financial struggles. It was Lord Carnarvon, an aristocratic enthusiast and sponsor of digs, who provided Carter with the means to pursue his most ambitious dream: finding the lost tomb of a relatively obscure pharaoh named Tutankhamun. At that time, Tutankhamun was little more than a footnote in the annals of Egyptian history. A boy king who ruled during the 18th dynasty, around 1332 to 1323 BCE, Tutankhamun ascended the throne at a young age after the tumultuous reign of Akhenaten, the pharaoh who had attempted to upend Egypt's religious traditions by worshipping a single god, Aten. Tutankhamun's reign, though brief, was significant. He restored the traditional gods, moved the capital back to Thebes, and helped stabilize a fractured kingdom. Yet because of his short life and early death, possibly from injury or illness, his memory faded quickly. His tomb, if it still existed, was presumed either destroyed or hopelessly lost. But Carter refused to believe it. He scoured the Valley of the Kings year after year, convinced that Tutankhamun's final resting place lay hidden, waiting to be found. As seasons passed and funding dwindled, colleagues doubted him, and many declared the valley exhausted of secrets. Still, Carter persisted. Egypt in the 1920s was a place of contrast. Ancient relics stood amid the growing bustle of modern cities. Colonial powers held sway over ancient lands. Local workers, the skilled Kuftis, quietly toiled in the blistering heat, piecing together fragments of the past, while European archaeologists recorded the findings. And through it all, the sands kept their silence. Or so it seemed. Unbeknownst to the world, A boy king's tomb lay intact beneath a thin layer of dust and debris, untouched by the grave robbers who had plundered so many royal burials. Within that small, forgotten chamber slept treasures beyond imagination, and perhaps, as some whispered, a warning older than kingship itself. The stage was set. The final season of Carter's excavations was about to begin, and soon, Egypt's most extraordinary secret would emerge from the sands, along with the chilling tales that would capture the world's imagination for generations to come. The morning of November 4, 1922, began like many others in the Valley of the Kings, dry, breathless, the sun already merciless against the rocky slopes. Carter's team, weary after seasons of fruitless digging, worked methodically near the tomb of Ramses VI. It was then that a water carrier stumbled upon a step carved into the bedrock. Excitement electrified the air. As Carter oversaw the careful clearing of the area, more steps appeared, leading downward, 13 in all, until they ended at a sealed door. The doorway was stamped with indistinct impressions, yet one cartouche stood out: Tutankhamun. Carter immediately ordered the entrance to be covered and sent a telegram to Lord Carnarvon in England. At last have made wonderful discovery in valley. A magnificent tomb with seals intact. Carnarvon, thrilled beyond measure, arrived in Egypt within weeks, accompanied by his daughter, Lady Evelyn Herbert. On November 26, 1922, in the presence of a small, nervous gathering, Carter made a small breach in the doorway and inserted a candle. What he saw defied all expectation. Asked by Carnarvon if he could see anything, Carter famously replied, "Yes, wonderful things." Behind the door lay a treasure trove untouched by time. Golden couches shaped like sacred beasts, alabaster vases, intricately painted chests, chariots, weapons, thrones inlaid with precious stones. A king's legacy preserved against the ravages of millennia. And everywhere, the glitter of gold, gold upon gold. The tomb, designated KV-62, consisted of 4 main chambers: the antechamber, annex, burial chamber, and treasury. At first, the team explored only the antechamber, overwhelmed by the sheer number and artistry of the artifacts. Each item had to be documented, photographed, and carefully catalogued before being removed. Carter's meticulousness, though frustrating to some, ensured that the discovery would be preserved for posterity. Days stretched into weeks. The antechamber gave way to the burial chamber, where a massive shrine dominated the space. Nested within it, like a series of Russian dolls, were 4 gilded shrines protecting the sarcophagus, and within, the mummy of Tutankhamun himself. The walls of the burial chamber were adorned with vivid paintings depicting the boy king's journey into the afterlife. Scenes of Anubis, god of embalming, Osiris, god of the underworld, and the welcoming embrace of Nut, goddess of the sky. The colors, protected from light for over 3,000 years, seemed as fresh as if painted the day before. The annex, a chaotic jumble of daily life objects, and the treasury, where sacred statues and vessels crowded together, spoke of a civilization where death was not an end, but a continuation, a journey into eternity equipped with all necessities and divine protection. Throughout the excavation, Carter faced challenges: the fragility of the artifacts, the intense heat, the ever-present threat of theft, and the political tensions of colonial Egypt. Yet he pressed on, methodically peeling back layers of history, restoring shattered relics, and piecing together the story of a young king whose life and death had been all but forgotten. Each day inside the tomb was like stepping through a portal into another world. A world of gods and pharaohs, of ceremonial splendor and mortal fragility. And yet, even amid the triumph of discovery, an unease lingered. The team joked nervously about ancient curses. A cobra, symbol of royalty, devoured Carter's pet canary, a dark omen in local superstition. Some workers murmured prayers to ward off unseen forces. Outside the tomb, the world waited breathlessly. Newspapers reported every find with growing hysteria. building an aura of mystery and dread around the excavation. What lay hidden in Tutankhamun's tomb was not just material wealth, but a doorway into forgotten belief, a direct link to an ancient worldview where death and eternity intertwined in gold and silence. The treasures glittered under the harsh desert lights, but in the shadows of the tomb, older forces seemed to stir. Forces that had guarded the boy king for thousands of years, and perhaps were not yet ready to let go. The tomb of Tutankhamun had been found, but the true story was only beginning. Only a few short months after the world celebrated the discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb, a shadow fell over the expedition. On April 5, 1923, Lord Carnarvon, the man who had made the excavation possible, died under mysterious and sudden circumstances in Cairo. The sequence of events began innocuously. Shortly after entering the tomb's inner chambers, Carnarvon was bitten by a mosquito on his cheek, a trivial injury at first. However, he accidentally reopened the wound while shaving, causing the bite to become infected. In an era before the widespread use of antibiotics, such infections could quickly turn deadly. Over the following days, Carnarvon's health deteriorated rapidly. He suffered from a high fever, chills, and delirium. Doctors diagnosed him with blood poisoning, sepsis, a condition where the body's immune response to infection spirals out of control, leading to systemic failure. Then, in the early hours of April 5, 1923, Carnarvon succumbed to the infection. It was said that at the moment of his death, the lights in Cairo flickered and went out, a chilling detail seized upon by journalists eager to craft a tale of supernatural vengeance. Even more ominously, back in England, his beloved dog reportedly let out a howl and died within hours of his passing. The parallels between his death and the legends of tomb curses were irresistible to the press. Headlines around the world screamed of the Pharaoh's Curse, the story of a wealthy English lord, struck down after defiling a sacred tomb, ignited imaginations across continents. Speculation grew even more feverish when it was noted that Tutankhamun's mummy bore a lesion on its cheek, in the very same spot where Carnarvon had been bitten. Coincidence, or divine retribution? Medical experts at the time, and many since, argued that Carnarvon's death was tragic but explainable. He had been in poor health for years, weakened by injuries from a severe automobile accident in 1903. His immune system was compromised, and the unsanitary conditions of early 20th century Egypt made infections all too common. Nonetheless, in the public mind, facts were no match for the allure of mystery. Carnarvon's death became the first link in a growing chain of deaths and misfortunes attributed to the so-called curse. It cast a dark veil over the dazzling discoveries still emerging from the Valley of the Kings and ensured that the tomb of Tutankhamun would forever be intertwined with legends of wrath and retribution. Howard Carter, ever the rationalist, dismissed the talk of curses as nonsense. But deep in the desert, among the shattered statues and faded hieroglyphs, even the most skeptical might have wondered if ancient forces had been stirred. One man had opened the door to Egypt's hidden past, and paid the ultimate price. But he would not be the last. The death of Lord Carnarvon sent a shockwave through the world, but it was the press, hungry for sensation, that turned tragedy into myth. Within hours of the news breaking, newspapers across Europe and America seized upon the idea of an ancient curse. Headlines blared: Pharaoh's curse strikes down Lord Carnarvon. Death comes on the wings of the tomb. The mummy's vengeance. Archaeologists beware. The public, already enchanted by the mysteries of ancient Egypt, was eager to believe. The tomb of Tutankhamun had been untouched for millennia. Its opening seemed to demand a price. Every detail, however small, was woven into a growing legend. The strange death of Carnarvon's dog, the rumored power outage in Cairo, the supposed lesion on Tutankhamun's mummy that mirrored Carnarvon's mosquito bite. Soon, stories of the Pharaoh's Curse were on every front page. Journalists cited ancient inscriptions warning of death to tomb robbers, though no such curse inscription had been found in Tutankhamun's tomb itself. Authors and spiritualists fanned the flames. Marie Corelli, a popular novelist and mystic, warned in a published letter that any who dared enter the tomb would face dire spiritual consequences. Even prominent figures like Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, the creator of Sherlock Holmes, weighed in, suggesting that Carnarvon's death had been caused by elemental spirits set to guard the tomb. The media frenzy created a perfect storm. Facts were mixed freely with speculation. Rumors were reported as truth. Every illness, every accident among those connected to the excavation, however tenuous, was interpreted as another victim claimed by the ancient curse. In the midst of this, Howard Carter tried to maintain a rational front. He publicly dismissed talk of curses as nonsense, insisting that archaeological work was governed by science, not superstition. Yet even Carter could not entirely escape the shadow of the myth growing around him. One particularly memorable headline in an American newspaper read, "Death will slay with his wings whoever disturbs the peace of the pharaoh." This invented line, never actually found in any Egyptian tomb, nonetheless entered the cultural imagination and was quoted endlessly for decades afterward. The sensationalism served a dual purpose. It kept the world's attention riveted on the Valley of the Kings, boosting newspaper sales, book deals, and museum exhibitions. At the same time, it deepened the mystique of ancient Egypt as a land of secrets, magic, and eternal forces beyond human understanding. Thus, the Curse of the Pharaohs was born, not from ancient spells, but from the fertile imaginations of a modern world craving wonder, danger, and stories of forbidden knowledge. And once unleashed, the legend would prove impossible to contain. While Lord Carnarvon's death ignited the legend of the Pharaoh's curse, it was the string of later deaths, some strange, others merely coincidental, that solidified its place in popular imagination. The list of supposed victims grew year by year. Shortly after Carnarvon's death in 1923, his half-brother Aubrey Herbert also passed away. Herbert had long suffered from health issues, including near blindness, and died following complications from dental surgery. Despite the mundane medical explanation, many linked his demise to the tomb. George J. Gould I, a wealthy American financier who had visited the tomb shortly after its opening, fell ill with a fever immediately upon returning home. He died of pneumonia within months. Hugh Evelyn White, a British archaeologist involved in the early documentation of the tomb, reportedly committed suicide in 1924. Some accounts suggest that before his death, he left a note claiming he had succumbed to the curse. Archibald Douglas Reed, the radiologist who first X-rayed Tutankhamun's mummy, died mysteriously in 1924, allegedly before he could complete his report. Some sources attribute his death to exhaustion and illness. The following year, in 1925, Sir Lee Stack, the Governor-General of Sudan, was assassinated in Cairo. Though his death was politically motivated, newspapers lumped him among the curse's victims. Richard Bethel, Howard Carter's personal secretary, was found dead in his London club in 1929 under suspicious circumstances. Shortly thereafter, Bethel's father, Lord Westbury, leapt to his death from a building. Both deaths fueled fresh speculation that the curse reached even those only peripherally involved. The pattern was clear. Any sudden death of a person remotely associated with the tomb, no matter how distant the connection, was quickly attributed to the curse. Yet a closer examination of the facts paints a different picture. Lady Evelyn Herbert, Lord Carnarvon's daughter and one of the first people to enter the tomb, lived until 1980, passing away at the age of 79. Howard Carter, the discoverer himself, died peacefully in 1939 at the age of 64, hardly an early death for the era. Of the 58 individuals present at the official opening of Tutankhamun's tomb and sarcophagus, only a small fraction died within a decade. Statistical studies, such as one published in the British Medical Journal in 2002, found no significant difference in survival rates between those exposed to the tomb and those who were not. Despite these sober realities, the myth of a deadly curse endured. Why? Perhaps because death, random and capricious as it often is, demands an explanation. And perhaps because the notion of ancient gods exacting revenge stirred something primal in the modern heart. A yearning to believe that the mysteries of the past still held power over the present. In the end, most of the so-called victims of the pharaoh's curse likely succumbed to natural causes, illness, accident, and the frailty of the human body in an age with limited medical remedies. But logic rarely stands a chance against legend. And in the case of Tutankhamun's tomb, the legend proved as enduring as the treasures it contained. One by one, real and imagined victims were woven into the story, not by spells etched into stone, but by the pens of journalists and the imaginations of those desperate for wonder. While the notion of an ancient curse made for captivating headlines, scientists and medical experts sought more rational explanations for the deaths and illnesses linked to Tutankhamun's tomb. One of the earliest scientific theories proposed was the presence of toxic molds and bacteria inside the sealed chambers. The tomb had remained untouched for over 3,000 years. A closed environment where dangerous microorganisms could thrive in organic materials such as wood, textiles, and even the mummy itself. Research in the late 20th century identified Aspergillus flavus, a mold capable of producing deadly aflatoxins. Exposure to this mold, especially in confined spaces with poor ventilation, could cause severe respiratory issues, immune suppression, and even death in individuals with weakened health, like Lord Carnarvon, who already suffered from chronic illness. Additionally, Pseudomonas and Clostridium bacteria, both capable of causing infections, were likely present in the tomb's dust and artifacts. Modern medical studies have confirmed that inhaling dormant spores in ancient tombs can lead to infections like pneumonia or septicemia, particularly in stressed or immunocompromised individuals. Another factor considered was the air quality inside the tombs. When the sealed chambers were breached, a sudden rush of air, carrying spores, molds, and perhaps even ancient toxins, would have engulfed those present. This initial exposure could explain the sudden onset of fevers and respiratory symptoms reported among some early visitors. In the 2000s, researchers such as Dr. Caroline Stenger-Philippe from Strasbourg University suggested that radioactive elements naturally occurring in Egyptian soil could have accumulated inside the tomb. Low-level radiation exposure over time might have contributed to health complications. However, not all experts agree that pathogens or radiation alone could account for the deaths. Statistical analyses conducted in the 21st century compared the lifespans of individuals associated with the tomb to control groups and found no significant decrease in life expectancy. A study published in the British Medical Journal in 2002 concluded that the curse was psychological and media-driven rather than biological. Yet, the power of suggestion, known as the nocebo effect, cannot be underestimated. Belief in the curse itself may have heightened stress and fear among those involved, weakening immune systems and exacerbating minor ailments into fatal conditions. Ultimately, while science offers plausible explanations involving mold, bacteria, toxins, and psychological effects, it cannot completely dispel the mystique surrounding Tutankhamun's tomb. The ancient Egyptians deeply believed in the protective magic of their tombs. Even if modern science dismisses the curse as myth, the psychological impact on the human mind, facing the unknown within the timeless silence of the tomb, remains as powerful as ever. In the clash between ancient mystery and modern science, both sides have left their mark on the legend. And perhaps, somewhere between microbes and myth, the real story of the pharaoh's curse still lingers. Long before modern myths of pharaoh's curses captured the imagination, the ancient Egyptians themselves firmly believed that the dead needed protection, not only from the natural forces of decay but also from human interference. Tombs were sacred gateways between the world of the living and the afterlife. Ensuring their inviolability was a religious duty, and real dangers were perceived in tomb robbery, which could disrupt the eternal existence of the soul, the ka, and deny the deceased a blessed afterlife. Thus, many tombs, especially during the Old Kingdom, circa 2686–2181 BCE, and Middle Kingdom, century 2055 to 1650 BCE, bore written warnings to deter would-be violators. One of the most famous examples comes from the tomb of Kentaka Ikakai, 6th dynasty. The inscription reads, "As for all men who shall enter this my tomb, impure, there will be judgment, an end shall be made of them. I shall seize his neck like a bird. I shall cast the fear of myself into him." In another tomb at Saqqara, a dire warning was left. "Cursed be those who disturb the rest of a king. They shall break the serpent's coils and be powerless against the crocodile, the hippopotamus, and the lion." These were not curses in the Hollywood sense of magical traps. Rather, they were moral and supernatural threats. Reminders that divine forces would avenge any violation and that robbers would meet both worldly punishment and spiritual annihilation. The Egyptians viewed the tomb as a microcosm of the universe, a carefully ordered space where everything had meaning. To disturb it was not merely theft, it was an assault on Ma'at, the divine order of the cosmos. Magic spells, statues of guardian deities, protective amulets, and even magical bricks, inscribed with formulae, were used inside tombs to shield the deceased. Sometimes figures of jackal-headed Anubis, the god of mummification and protection, were placed at the entrances. Interestingly, no such warning was discovered in Tutankhamun's tomb. Its hurried construction may explain the absence of formal curses or extensive protective spells, though this did not prevent later generations from imagining one. The psychological power of these ancient inscriptions, invoking crocodiles, serpents, and divine wrath, was immense. In a society that deeply feared chaos and revered the afterlife, the idea that the dead could defend themselves was both comforting and terrifying. Thus, the belief that tombs were guarded by supernatural forces was not an invention of the 20th century press. It was a very real part of ancient Egyptian culture. And it planted the seeds from which modern myths of deadly curses would one day grow. The sands of Egypt hold many secrets, some carved into stone, others whispered by the winds of history. The tale of the pharaoh's curse stands at the crossroads between ancient belief and modern imagination. On one hand, science offers clear explanations: mold spores, bacterial infections, psychological stress. Statistical studies show no significant rise in mortality among those who entered the tomb. By every rational measure, there was no supernatural force reaching from the grave. And yet, the myth endures. Because human beings are not creatures of facts alone. We crave mystery. We seek meaning in coincidence, comfort in ancient patterns, and awe in the unknown. The idea that a king, forgotten for millennia, could still protect his tomb with invisible hands, that death itself could be a gatekeeper of sacred memory, speaks to something deep and eternal in us. Was there truly a curse? Or was the curse our own fear? Our instinct to believe that some places are meant to remain undisturbed? In the end, perhaps it does not matter. Because standing in the shadow of Tutankhamun's tomb, among treasures forged 3,000 years ago, one does not need a curse to feel the breath of eternity brush against their skin. The curse, if it exists, is not a punishment. It is a reminder that some mysteries are older than memory and stronger than time. And whether we believe in curses or not, we are all, in some way, still haunted by the dreams of kings long dead.